right. I'm putting my camera on. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Uh, Israel. Welcome to another class, Spiritual Food. All right. The way, the truth, and the life. I'm going to jump right into it. So, got some discoveries from archaeology about the Most High. His name. We're gonna dive into that, and then a little on Abraham. So then we're gonna dive into this nonsense with Garfield, right? So, but before I begin, I got to give all praises, and I do mean all praises to the Creator of all, the ancient, the Holy One of Israel, the Ancient of Days, Yahweh's name in the Hebrew, which means I am. He is a called us to be, and we pay homage to the first begotten Son, Hamashiach Yahweh Shai, Christ Jesus in the English, which means anointed Savior, anointed salvation. And as a brother Drew pushed in his letter, felt to contend for the faith that was one delivered to the saints. Okay, right there. That let me get into the comment section. All right, let me start sharing my screen and get right into it. Get right into it again. So, screen. Yeah. I'm getting right to it. All right, here we go. All right, this is Abraham. The top 10 archaeological discoveries, digging for the truth, episode 141. I just clipped a part of it to get right to the point. All right, we start from there. Here we go.
Very good. All right. Well, Brian, it's hard to believe, but we're down to our last couple of discoveries in biblical archaeology related to Abraham. And let's get right to it. The enclosure of Abram on Shoshenq the First's topographical lists at Karnak. We need to unpackage that a little bit for our viewers.
Sure. Well, the Egyptian Pharaoh Shoshenq first, we believe, is the biblical Pharaoh Shishak, and he invaded the land of Palestine, Judah, and Israel in about 926 BC. And when he got back, he had this great relief inscribed on the wall at the temple at Karnak. And on it are all of the places that he claims to have conquered. Each is a name ring depicted as a bound prisoner in the cartouche with the toponym and Egyptian hieroglyphics. And one of them says that it was the fort or enclosure of Abram that he conquered. And this is in an area, a region where the other ones that were near the Negev, which is interesting because in scripture, we read in Genesis 12:1, Genesis 13:1, Genesis 20 verse 1, that Abraham frequented the Negev. And so it's hardly surprising then that a place might be named after him. And so we see that on the temple wall at Karnak. This, by the way, is the only ancient inscription that mentions Abraham from antiquity.
Okay, so that is his name mentioned on the walls of Egypt. All right, so we see clear there. So I don't see the Pharaoh putting this man name in there that never existed. Okay, the enclosure of Abraham, and this man is a fictional character, and it's on the wall, and this Pharaoh king put it on there. Come on, I mean this man has to have been well known, and they know that he was a real person for it to be on there, right? So clearly, that's evidence that Abraham was a real person right there. It's on their wall. Unless they're claiming that everybody on the wall is fictional. Everybody that's named on there is fictional. You just can't point out one person name and say that's fictional, and the rest of them is historical. All right, so let's go on to the next one. All right, we're now going on to the oldest inscription on the name. It's Yahweh. They got Yahweh. You know what I'm saying? We know that that's not the name. The name is it's actually Yahweh. Some say Yahuwah. Others other different names, Yahovah, but we know it's not Yahweh according to the grammar of Hebrew. Okay. Okay. Let me go ahead and start and play this right here. All right, 1 second. Here we go. All right, so it's going to take a couple of seconds to start to play, and we're going to get into the next one.
Well, there's actually two inscriptions that are very significant. They're both located in the country of Sudan. In ancient times, that was part of Egypt. And one of them was found first in a site called Amara West when they were excavating a temple built by Ramses II. And he listed out his foreign enemies. And one of those was an inscription that translates the nomads of Yahweh. And then that was in the late 30s. Then later in the late 50s, they excavated another site not too far away from Amara West called Soleb. And they were excavating there, and they found a list of foreign enemies to the pharaoh Amenhotep III. And one of his enemies also was translated the nomads of Yahweh. And so this Soleb inscription, and I want to emphasize this, there are many inscriptions that have been found through archaeology that mention the name of the God of Israel, Yahweh.
Yes. See, so there's many inscriptions with the Most High's name there, YHWH. Many. Not just these two I'm showing you. There's many of them there. All right.
But this Soleb inscription is very important because it is the oldest inscription that has been found to date mentioning the name of the God of Israel.
So the area of modern Sudan was under control of the ancient pharaohs, and so this inscription was found in the 1930s. When they started deciphering it back then, the archaeologists did they recognize the importance of it, Joel? And what kind of response was there back then, or was it tepid?
Well, yeah, there was. It was understood to be very important mentioning the name of the God of Israel. However, there never has really been a controversy on what these inscriptions say. That they mention the name Yahweh has, in all of the translations that have been done, they agree that's what it says.
Yeah.
Where the controversy has been is scholars have been reluctant to attribute who the nomads of Yahweh are in regards to them being Israel. So, these are the Kenites and these are the Edomites. These are anybody but the Israelites, which is really ridiculous because in the Old Testament, of course, the name Yahweh appears 6,823 times. And so maybe that's the nomads of Yahweh. And the reason why they are reluctant to do that is because it throws a monkey wrench in many theories that are out there.
All right, so we see clearly what it is. He's throwing a monkey wrench. All these things that they're finding is throwing a monkey wrench in the lies they've been telling for years. So I've even heard Garfield say that the Yahweh is an Edomite god. It's just a bunch of crap. All right, let me stop sharing right quick. Pull this down. Ain't no way he's Yahweh is an Edomite god. Because I'm going to read when we was coming through the wilderness, they wouldn't let us through their land, and we mentioned the name of our God, and they did not let us through their land. All right, let me go ahead and read and show that right quick. They did not let us through their land. All right, we're in the book of Numbers, chapter 20, verse 14. We're trying to come through. They didn't let us. There's no way they was worshiping the Most High, the God of Israel. So Numbers 20, verse 14, and Moses sent messengers from Kadesh unto the king of Edom. Thus saith thy brother Israel, we brothers, thou knowest all the travail that have befallen us, how our fathers went down into Egypt, and we have dwelt in Egypt a long time, and the Egyptians vexed us and our fathers. And when we cried unto YHWH Yahweh, so they mentioned the name of the Most High right here to the Edomites, he heard our voice and sent who? An angel, and have brought us forth out of Egypt. And behold, we are in Kadesh, a city in the uttermost of thy borders. So we see here that the Most High sent an angel. It was an angel that pulled us up out of Egypt, okay, in that pillar of cloud. Right? I mean, the situation at the Red Sea. Clearly, Moses making here say that this was an angel. And Paul made it clear to us that Christ led us through the wilderness. He would, at this point, would have to be an angel. According to this verse right here. So ain't no way he's the most high God if this verse is saying he's an angel. Then let us out of there. All right. Continuing. Let us pass, I pray thee, through the country. We will not pass through the fields, no through no through the vineyards, neither will we drink of the water of the wells. We will go by the king's highway. We will not turn to the right hand nor to the left until we have passed thy borders. And Edom said unto him, meaning unto Israel, thou shalt not pass by me, lest I come out against thee with the sword. So they didn't want to let us pass. All right. And the children of Israel said unto him, we will go by the highway, and if my cattle drink of the water, then I will pay for it. I will only, without doing anything on else, go through on my foot. And he said, thou shalt not go through. And Edom came out against him with much people and with a strong hand. So they came up out against us, right? Thus Edom refused to give Israel passage through his border, wherefore Israel turned away from him. So there's no way he was worshiping the God of Israel. He wouldn't let us pass through the land when we came out of Egypt. So anyone talking about how Yahweh was the God of the Edomites, just lying. It isn't the truth. They can't show no kind of inscription that says that. We have inscriptions that the brother just brought up and showed you that was a God of Israel, the nomads. That's not Edomites, all right? They cannot show that. We was at this time, we were the nomads traveling around in that desert trying to get to our land. That's why I said the Shazu, the nomads. At this time, Edom was in their land. They was not traveling around. So Edom couldn't have been nomad. They wasn't moving. They were stationary. We was the one traveling around at this time. And then the scripture dates to the time when we was traveling. Okay? So I don't know what he's talking about. Anyone talking about Garfield, I don't know what he's talking about Yahweh or Yahweh is an Edomite God. It's just a lie. He doesn't know what he's talking about. All right. Let me go back now to the video and finish it up here. Right. Take me to play this. One second here. Stop sharing that and come back to the. Hold on. All right, here we go. Now he's going to go into the reasons why some of these. I think this is the one where he's going to go off into why they're reluctant to admit and giving some of their reasons.
Okay, so the inscription itself dates to the 15th, end of the 15th century BC. And of course, give or take 10, 20 years based on how Egyptian chronology kind of shifts back and forth, but generally to the end of the 15th century BC, to the time of Amenhotep III. And it's one of his northern enemies. So we also know, that it's an enemy somewhere to the north of Egypt. And so, yeah, it's very early. We're talking about the same half century that Moses lived in. We're not talking long after the death of Moses that Amenhotep III put this foreign enemy inscription on his temple. Yeah, this is from Donald Redford. This is how.
So again, this is right after Moses. That was dated too. Kind of like when I was reading when Moses was alive. So we see clearly again, it's around the exact same time.
I learned about this inscription. I was reading his book, Egypt, Canaan, and Israel in Ancient Times. And I came across this quote. He says this, talking again about this soul of inscription. He says, for half a century, it has been generally admitted that we have here the Tetragrammaton, the name of the Israelite God, Yahweh. And if this be the case, and listen to what he says here, as it undoubtedly is, the passage constitutes a most precious indication of the whereabouts. Now, here's the date of the inscription. During the late 15th century BC of the enclave revering this God. And so I think it is important to emphasize that this is an agreed upon inscription, this find, and the translation of it is not controversial. It's not me and you saying this is what this inscription says. This is what secular scholarship, how it's translated through secular scholarship. This is the date assigned to it from secular scholarship, the end of the 15th century BC, which, by the way, is the biblical date for the conquest.
All right, so we're gonna go into their excuses why they're reluctant to accept it. So more proof of the date, and secular scholar agree that's what it says. So when nobody's making up the interpretation of that, that's what they agree upon. It actually says. All right, so we're gonna continue. We're gonna get now to the reason. I guess this is the one. The reasons they're gonna be given.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, the way that secular scholarship does not believe that in the end of the 15th century BC that the Israelites existed. And so,
Right.
And they, of course, believe that the Bible was written much later. And so if the Bible was written later, then why do we have this group of nomads worshiping Yahweh running around in the late 15th century? It's a real problem. And so what they do is they say, well, this isn't talking about the Israelites. This is talking about the Kenites or the Edomites. And then later, when Israel comes into existence, then they borrow the name of their God, Yahweh. Well, of course, if you have the biblical people that are in the Bible, the Edomites and the Kenites around in the 15th century, then why not the Israelites, who the Bible also says are around in the 15th century? So it just doesn't work. Their arguments don't work, and they're just trying to cling to these old theories that really fall apart with evidence like this, such as the documentary hypothesis and these kinds of theories. And it's also a problem, as you brought up, for those who believe in a late date for the conquest in the mid 13th century BC, because if you have the conquest happening in, say, 1250 or 1230 BC, then again, why do we have this group of nomads who are worshiping Yahweh, like the Bible says, running around in the end of the 15th century BC? And yes, this word that is translated from Egyptian as nomads is shazu, which means nomads. It's people, as you said, like the Bedouin that we see today running around. And so what, if you think about Amenhotep III, who is identifying his enemies, and he has to identify the Israelites whom we're reading about in the book of Exodus at this time. What better way to describe them, identify them? You can't identify them as a nation. They're not a nation yet. You can't identify them as a city. They don't live in cities. They're nomads. So how does he identify them? He identifies them by the name of the God that they worship. And what better way to describe the people we're reading about in the Bible, who are wandering around in the wilderness, following a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day, who are following their God Yahweh. It's perfect. And there is no evidence. There is no inscriptions. There's no evidence at all that the Edomites or the Kenites or anybody else worship the God Yahweh. Maybe individuals did, but as far as nations go, whereas even as the quote that we just read says, this name that's found is the name of the God of Israel.
Right. So yeah, I mean that's just straight to the point. All right. So we waiting for the inscription about Edomites worshiping the Most High God, when the Bible is clear, and especially in Malachi chapter 1, where God hates them forever. And then the nail in the coffin is Obadiah. He's going to get rid of them forever. So all of them. So, I mean, it don't make no sense to them who's worshiping God. And they would never worship God. Esau, the man who started the nation, he didn't like the Most High. According to the text, he broke at least 9 of the 10 commandments. That's there. So there's no way he worshiped the Most High God. All right. And Paul talks about him too in Hebrews chapter, I think it's chapter 13. He talks about him. He talks about Esau, right? If I'm not mistaken, it's the 13th chapter. He was a fornicator from the beginning and sold his birthright for a morsel. So we know how the forefather rose. So there's no way he was worshiping the Most High. All right, so let me continue here the last part of this video before I get into the one with Garfield. You can hear this madness from Garfield, just crazy. That I can go ahead and read the evidence that he's just lying.
Well, the key is Exodus 3, where Moses asks God for his name. And of course, he says, I am who I am. And that has more to do with what God's name means. But his name is Yahweh. And
Yes.
so he's given his name Yahweh. And then it says in Exodus 3:15, it says, God says, this is my name forever, the name that I shall be called from generation to generation. And so that gives a time element. That means that God is going to be called by the name Yahweh through all generations and through history. And so really the question is there archaeological evidence for that God has been called by the name Yahweh from this time, Exodus 3 on down until today? And the answer is clearly yes, because of these many inscriptions that have been found. We mentioned two, one from about 1400 BC at Soleb, one from Amara West, about 1300 BC. You mentioned the Moabite stone, which is the 9th century BC, that mentions the name Yahweh. We have the silver amulets from Jerusalem, 6th century BC, and the Lachish letters, and I could go on and on and on.
Yes.
Down to the Dead Sea Scrolls that mention the name Yahweh over and over again. So we have.
So that right is a picture of the silver scrolls. This is the picture of the silver scrolls, and if I remember correctly, this is Leviticus 22, when he put his name put his name on Israel. We can see that that's Paleo Hebrew. So that goes back to the anointing when he told Moses put his name on there. May the Most High bless you and keep you and be gracious unto you, and his face shine upon you, and he shall put my name on the children of Israel. Okay, that's what this is, right? I think that's number 622 down to 27. But this is on the silver scroll that you see right there. All right, let me finish this video up.
Of all these archaeological finds, from all these inscriptions that cover from generation to generation, proving that God has indeed been known and called by the name Yahweh down through time. This is very much in contrast to the gods of the other nations who have disappeared over time. Where do people get together and worship Moloch, the god of Canaan? Where do they get together and worship the gods of the Philistines or the?
All right, so
disingenuous. Now, of course, in tongue in cheek, Garfield's going to,
it's just the one with Garfield now. So we have the information there. I mean, there's no question about the Most High and us. We're there. We're mentioned. Before I start this video, let me show you these inscriptions here right quick. Okay, let me show you this. This is the Soleb temple cartouche of the Shazu of Yahweh's land. The Soleb temple cartouche dates 1396 to 1358 BC. The Egyptian inscription on the cartouche reads, the Shazu of Yahweh's land. The cartouche is on the wall of the Soleb temple of Amenhotep III in Nubia. Here is a reference to the promised land of Canaan, promised by the people of Yahweh, promised by or to the people of Yahweh, when Joshua was still alive after the completing the conquest. Right, so we see it here. This is what it says right here. So we have an Egyptian pharaoh plainly telling us who we are. We are a people. We do exist, and our God name is there. It's another picture of what it is here. All right. Just want to scroll down. So we see this is biblical archaeology. You can guess this is Bible CA. Okay, this is where this is from. All right, let me get the other one. Let me get the Berlin statue. All right, the Israel name ring in the Berlin statue pedestal relief, 1350 BC, again around the same time. And Israel Meneptah Stela on 1205 BC. Right, so we see that the Berlin one is even older. Is even older than the Meneptah Stele. This is it right here. You can see they try to break the back of it. Let me give you some more pictures of it. Again, this is on Bible CA, and it says /Exodus. But you go on Bible CA, that's the source where it is. You go to Pool of Siloam, one scroll down. So they're showing you more upon it. Scroll some more down. So the person is showing you the pictures of the beak is here, and it's here again. The legs is here. The lotus pool, the flowering reed, right? It's the burning relief. More and more, and then you can see clearly this is how it is right here, complete. Just the line show you where they cracked it at. Here's the crack. Here it is where they cracked it at back here. And it was a reconstruction of it. We can clearly see that this says Israel, and these other names there of Ashkelon and Canaan, the same name that you find on the Meneptah stele right below it, right? So we can see it's the same thing. So it's Israel. They're going to fight and say that it's not, because again, this stuff going to throw a monkey wrench, as the guy said, you know, all that stuff they've been saying for years, and that they wrong. Archaeology is killing them right now. They cannot deal with it. All right, it's straight up proving them wrong. You got two inscriptions here proving Israel and the Most High name was there, and they knew about it because it's on their walls on Egypt. All right, so let me get now to the video. You're about to hear this madness from Garfield. Then I'm gonna come back and play another video with this other professor debunking what Garfield is about to say. All right, near the end of this video here. All right, so we see Captain Tazaria questioning Garfield on his book, and he about to say some wild, crazy stuff. Here we go.
Take his stabs at me, I'm gonna take my stabs at him. But him writing this book did make me look up certain things. I would have never looked up the JP. That's what I'm saying. I would have never looked. No, it's not. No. I disagree with the Plato angle. I disagree with the JEPD because only Western scholars abide by that. European scholars don't. He just admitted that it has holes in it. But I can see why he would put it in the book, because obviously scholars have looked at.
1 second, let me run this back. This is not the beginning of this video. Why is this starting here? All right, hold on. This is not the clip. 1 second here. This must be something different. Stop it. All right, let me close that, but that's not the clip I wanted to play. It's gonna be right here. Okay. This is the clip I wanted to play. Here we go. This is the clip. All right. You're about to hear it now. You're just asking him about his book. There we go.
And Passover and its origins. Hezekiah, Sennacherib, and the lost tribes of Judah. I feel if people feel the 70 AD that the people were Judeans, the lost tribes of Judah actually answers who actually was in the land at the time, and it wasn't really the indigenous Judeans.
So he's this guy's lost his mind. So there was not real Israelites in the land in the first century, in 70 AD. It was not the indigenous people that was there before, that was exiled. That was not them that was in the land according to him. Offers no proof of that at all. All right.
So I think I addressed that in this book, but I don't want people to feel I'm leaving out all Hebrews or Israelites, because the lost tribes address a lot of people who claim in China, Japan, the United States, Europe, Africa, who claim that they're lost tribes. It actually addresses everybody who actually feels that they belong to the book, as far as an idea.
So you would say that you debunk anybody being an Israelite?
In a sense, yes.
Okay, so it doesn't matter, like the so-called Jew,
right?
Us, like you said,
yeah,
Japan,
especially
no matter where you are, you could not be an Israelite from back in the day.
Can be.
So is your statement then that Israelites is made up, or that they're gone? Like who would you consider?
Biblical is all right. That's a very good question.
Who would you, or what region or locale would you actually consider to be an Israelite?
All right. First of all, for everybody in the Kemet folks, Black Power folks, say that Israelite never existed. The reason why they say that, and I agree with them, is because if you're speaking from a biblical perspective, you see, it's hard for me and Captain to debate, because Captain is saying, I believe the Bible. I can't debate a belief. I only could go by what history says. So now the problem with debating this and saying if Israelites existed or not is that you have history that documents Israelites.
You have history that documents Israelite, even though you just said earlier they never existed. But now history documents them. This guy done lost his mind.
So when Garfield said Israelites don't exist, I'm referring to the biblical Israelites because I don't look at Jacob as a real person.
So the biblical Israelites did not exist, yet we have historical documentation. That's why we just showed you the Shazu of the God of Yahweh, the Shazu of Yahweh, which they agree that's the Most High, the one of the Bible, his name, and the nomads documented. Then we went and show you I show you the Meneptah Stele. The name is on there. That's 1200 BC. Then I show you the Berlin cartouche, which predates that by a century. That the name Israel is also there as well. Biblical, because the other names in there all in the Bible. Ashkelon and Canaan is even there on the wall as well. This is all in the Bible. All of it is now being dug up and found on the walls down there in Egypt. So I don't know what he's talking about. The biblical Israelite did exist and they're historical. And I'm going to show more evidence to it later on.
If you read chapter 1, I talk about eponymous ancestors. And eponymous ancestors, like you come from Harlem, right? So you come from Harlem and you say, okay, we come from a guy named Harlem and we're Harlemites. But the truth of the matter is there's nobody in the world named Harlem. It was just made up as a story, which is called etiology, where you talk about the origins and where you come from.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody made up the story called Harlem. Oh, I'm from the guy named Mark Harlem. He used to live here and we named here and we all from Harlem, we Harlemites. But it's not true. You're creating a story to give yourself a history in Harlem.
So who does that? Who going around making up a fictitious name of someone that never existed at all? We know people have stolen people's identity, but the thing stolen is historical and it's real. But he's saying they just made up a person's name in history. Where's that at?
So now with Jacob and Israel, Jacob is not a real person per se. He's what you call an eponymous ancestor. All right? Eponymous ancestor. And once you realize that ancestor, they have it in every culture. That means you trace your roots to somebody. Garfield is from Cashapot, Jamaica. Let me give another example. There's a guy named David Casha that they claim that's where Casha come from. He never existed. You understand? It's just a name that they picked up from somewhere. Casha is like a nut or whatever, but there's nobody named Casha. So in Israelite history or in real history, we've been able to find Zebulon. We've been able to find Gad. We've been able to find Asher. We've been able to find Naphtali. We've been able to find Dan. We've been able to find Judah. We've been able to find a number of the people who are in the 12 tribes. But the problem is they are considered, those names are from either deities or geographical names. So when the people say, I'm from the tribe of God, you look at Isaiah 65:11, he's considered the God of luck. So when the person is praying, you see that God is actually in real life a real deity. You find the name in the Canaanite culture, Abu God or such and such God. So what was he? The God of luck. And you see him in the same biblical text because the Israelites are connected to the Canaanites. So there's no reason why. And then those people now who worship God, G-A-D, which is in the Mesha stele, by the way. And in the Mesha stele, according to that story, they killed off all the Israelites. So you see, there's a history that mentioned Israelites. So we can't say Israelites never existed. But the bottom line I'm trying to say is all these names in the Bible more than likely come from a geographic location or from a deity.
So he just got through saying the conscious community say that Israel never existed, and he said he agreed with him. Now he's saying we can't say they didn't exist because they're on the Meneptah stele. And Meneptah is with his hyperbole, of course, talking about how Israel's seed is not, which is, we know is hyperbole, right? Because we know we have documentation, archaeology of Israel continuing exist after Merneptah. So that's just hyperbole. Him talking about he wiped out all of Israel. So he just got through saying you cannot say Israel did not exist because they're under Merneptah stele. But he do agree with the unconscious community that Israel is not historical and they're not real. There's always a contradiction that he's going on here. It don't make no sense.
But you haven't answered my question though.
What?
So you would say there's
Today,
no Israelite?
there's nobody attached to the biblical Israelites.
So there's no such thing as an Israelite today.
As far as biblically, no.
Yeah, being biblical.
No.
There's no biblical Israelites today. No one is attached to Israel today. That's just what he's saying. He gonna say something different later.
So they were wiped out as a nation.
No.
I'm assuming so they existed as a nation one time. And you're saying
historically.
That's what I'm talking about. So because you're saying how they was mentioned on the Meshtel.
Mm-hmm.
You connected them with the Canaanites.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that Israel as a nation died off.
Israel as a nation no longer exists, and Israel. You see, what happened is it's called creative writing. Those people. Hold on. Historically speaking, the people who are Israelites were actually Canaanites.
Okay, the people who were Israelites were actually Canaanites. Is what he's saying now. First he said that Merneptah saying he wiped them out. Now he's saying that there's no one connected to them. Now the Israelites are really Canaanites, right? You just heard him say the Israelites were Canaanites. You can play it back for yourself and you can hear him say it, all right, once the video goes up.
The Canaanites spread out all over that region. The different cultures. You have
Canaanites exist today?
Canaanites existed then.
No,
as far as if they exist today, of course.
Canaanites exist today. The Israelites were the Canaanites. The Canaanites exist today, but there ain't no Israelites. This is just complete madness. This is stupid right here, man. Anybody can see through it. He's just lying. He's not making no sense at all whatsoever. How can the Israelites be Canaanites? And then you saying that there ain't no Israelites today, but they are Canaanites today.
Canaanites exist today, as far as a location, as far as a geographical location, but not as a central place where you say, "Oh, these are Canaanites." No.
So they don't exist in a particular location, but as far as I guess dispersed abroad, I guess yes, but they're not centralized in a particular location. So again, it's still a contradiction.
The Canaanites could still exist, but not the Israelites.
No, the Israelites, the biblical Israelites, is a story based off of Jacob.
Biblical term out of it. Yeah, I'm just talking about Israelites as a nation.
Israelites as a nation.
And the reason why I asked this question is because you said the Canaanites can still exist today. The Israelites can exist today.
The Israelites, all right. You see, it's hard to have a conversation about Israelites in history and Israelites in the Bible because you're always going to conflate both.
Well, I just said take the Bible out.
Take the Bible out?
Right.
The people who are considered Canaanites no longer exist.
Mm-hmm.
Now the people who are Canaanites, they no longer exist. First he said that they exist today, but not in a particular location, but they still exist today. Now he's saying they don't exist at all neither. Right? This guy is confused.
Because Canaan does no longer exist.
As a nickname, nobody
as
go
a
to a land
people
of Canaan,
as people living in the region.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, they went by different names, Ibonari, and different names that Egypt would call it here and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is, those people who descend from the Canaanites, as far as genetically, we have found people who connected to them.
Now they don't exist. Now he's found people that's connected to them now, to these people. He ain't trying to say what the connection is, but some people are. He found people that are connected to these people that don't exist. How does that make any sense? How you going to connect to someone that don't exist at all? Garfield, stop with the drugs, bro.
Some of those people live in the region that we call Israel today, and some of them are Arabs who live in the region today. But I am saying to you, Israel as a kingdom was destroyed once Assyria and Persia and all of them. They pretty much wiped them out.
So Israel now is going back to the Bible. He's going back to that time of Persia. You said Assyria and Persia. He said Israel was wiped out by the time you get to the Persian Empire, Israel was wiped out in the Persian Empire. All right? We just got me played back so you can hear it. By the time you get to the Persian Empire, Israel being wiped out, right? You play back, watch and say it.
But them are Arabs who live in the region today. But I am saying to you, Israel as a kingdom was destroyed once Assyria and Persia and all of them. They pretty much wiped them out. But
so they wiped them. So as a kingdom, they was completely wiped out as a kingdom. That's what he's saying. Okay, by the time you get into Assyria, Persia, it's wiped out as a kingdom. Okay, so not as a people, wiped out as a kingdom. All right, no more kingdom. Okay, we know that the kingdom fell to Nebuchadnezzar. That's before the Persian and Mede Empire, right? But he's saying by the time Persian and Mede Empire, the kingdom was supposed to be wiped out. I wonder what he's going to say about the Maccabees dynasty, king that ruled after the Persian and Mede.
So going forward, you mentioned what's the word we used again?
Eponymous ancestor.
And you mentioned your first chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So now I haven't read the whole book. I read, I think, the first chapter. I read the Genesis 1 and 2, which sparked the conversation we had.
Did Moses write?
And, did Moses write it? And I think I read a beginning part of the Exodus part.
Mm-hmm.
And so the interesting part about Genesis, the first chapter, was that it spoke about, if I'm to read you correctly, Hellenized Israelites copied from Plato. Would that be correct to say?
No.
Okay, so can you clear that up for us?
All right.
And I'm using that because you referenced in the book the Argonauts. Am I saying the name of the book?
Yeah. The Deserts and the Argonauts by Philip Whiteman.
Right.
All right.
And I know he used them as a reference point.
As a reference point,
right.
Yeah. Pretty much, you're talking about the areas that's called Stories Have No Borders. The purpose of these areas is to point out that whenever you have what's called a cultural writing, I am trying to show everybody, not only Israelites, how people wrote back then.
Mm-hmm.
If you say, for example, Moses went in the water, and we say, well, they probably stole that from Sargon. I don't think they stole it from Sargon. I think just like how I moved here to America, and I see people celebrate Thanksgiving and Halloween and go trick-or-treating. What if my family went trick-or-treating and celebrated Thanksgiving? We have now adapted the culture of the United States of America. It's the same thing if the Jews, this is actually true. Alexander actually shipped Hebrews to Egypt in Alexandria and had them imprisoned. Those people were released when after Alexander died. Those Alexander Jews have a lot to do with the writings that we have today. They lived within the culture and Hellenistic culture. So basically you have the Mesopotamian flood story, which is a mirror of what Berosus wrote. Then you have certain traditions, certain storylines, like with Cain and so forth. You find it in the biblical text. The problem is you have Greek elements in the story, and the biggest Greek element is chronological synchronistic writing, which is basically when you write, you have a writing and you have it synchronized with actual history. What the Bible did was, the Bible is one of the first
and
books.
the source for the Greek writing is Plato, right?
The source of the Greek writing is no, not necessarily Plato. It could be Homer. It could be anybody who retold the story then. It don't have to be Plato or them, but this is stories that's actually within the culture that's being told normally. So it's not like they say, okay, I'm going to read Plato or whatever. It could be a story told orally within the culture. And what happened is different stories people adapt at different time periods. There's stories from the Assyrian culture that's in the Bible, like 7 day. Nobody knows, no scholar knows where Sabbath comes from. But we know Mesopotamia had a 7-day week, and we know they had the 7th day that they stopped working and stopped doing things just like the Sabbath. But we don't find any records to say, here what, the Hebrews may have adapted this, but that's the closest they have come to. They're not saying it definitively.
And it has to be that they adapted. They couldn't have originated.
The reason is because the Hebrews are the Israelites within their culture. They were always the vassal.
So remember that right there. The Israelites in their culture was always the vassal. The vassal meaning that the one that was conquered, the one that was at the bottom. This is what he's saying. They was always being ruled. So they're the vassal. That's what he's saying. So because they're the vassal, the people that's above them, the vassal is gonna take on whatever their culture is, whatever their belief is. This is what he's trying to say.
Usually, when people are writing a history and they document it, usually it's the vassal that adopts it. I'm gonna give a quick example. Israel, you have something called loan words. If you study the Meganetta, right, there's a lot of Canaanite or Semitic words in the Meganetta that originated in the Meganetta. If I come up with a word saying double do, and in English now you want to say double do in English, so you say double do, and you write it in the English language now, but it's actually a word from a different culture. So now you adopt that word within, because you never had that word in your culture to begin with. There's a lot of Semitic words that weren't in the Egyptian culture, so they adapted it and drafted it into their language. What I mean. But hold on a second. It's the same thing with people who are vassal kings or whatever. It happens. That's what it happens.
No, I get that part, but when I said,
all right, so for some reason I paused it here. Again, we know what vassal means. We continue to play it. All right. Gonna come back on up in a second.
You made the point to say that there's no record of where the 7-day Sabbath came from.
So then we're going back to him making that statement about vassals. So I'm fast forwarding the video to the point where he's going to now say something different, because he's calling us a vassal and about the 7-day Sabbath and so on and so forth, right? That comes from Mesopotamia. Going back to all then, so we see way back in Mesopotamia time, or Sumer, which comes before Kemet, there was a 7th-day Sabbath way back then, right?
You're not. So right now we're not putting it on nobody.
Yeah,
right?
the closest we have is saying it may have happened in the Assyrian culture, because before the Babylonians took over, the Assyrians were ruling, and we have evidence of Sabbath in a certain manuscript, the Mesa Hadaya or whatever it's called.
But there's no set origin that y'all know of the Sabbath. So now the Israelites, of course, have their biblical record of a Sabbath. So they couldn't be the originators of that.
They could be the originators, but the issue is, remember, there's no writing record of the culture to tell us that. The oldest writing we have is 200 BC. And even if there was writings before, we understand that this is a vassal kingdom that was being ruled and conquered.
Have to be a vassal kingdom at that time, because
let me say that our oldest writing is not 200 BC. He's speaking of the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have stuff that predates the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm about to pull that a little bit. We do have some communication that talks about the Torah that predates the Dead Sea Scroll.
It would just be something that's passed down orally until they would be able to write it down, so to speak. Okay. And I'm just giving an open-minded perspective of it. So that would be something that would just be passed down orally until they would write it down. And what I always liken when we talk about history and archaeology, just because it hasn't been discovered yet, you can't say it's not written yet. Like you mentioned the Mesh Stele, which was discovered in the 1800s.
Right.
Prior to that, there was no mention of Moab or anything like that.
Well, I'm not 100% sure, because Moab is actually on Egyptian records. So
you would probably be the first person I've ever heard say that.
Yeah, it's actually on Egyptian records. But what I will say though, if remember, the whole thing about 7 comes from Mesopotamia, because they believe there's only 7 stars that existed in the world, which was the 5 planets.
So you're talking about written down, right?
Right.
So the 7-day Sabbath, he's saying, come from Mesopotamia. All right. That's 5 planets and the sun and the moon is what he said.
So written down.
No, not necessarily written down. My issue is the whole thing with 7, we know it comes from Mesopotamia. Because remember, if they were influenced by Kemet had a 10-day week. This was my issue with Jabari saying that everything, most of the stuff from Kemet.
Right.
So Kemet have a 10-day week. Remember, we was in captivity in Egypt, and Kemet has a 10-day week, and we're the vassal, so we should have adopted that and came out of Kemet with a 10-day week, but yet we had a 7-day week. I think Captain gonna bring him out on that. You know what I'm saying?
So if there's a 10-day week, why didn't they adopt a 10-day week in the Bible? The issue is, of course, the Bible wasn't written at that time.
So the reason why we didn't come out of Egypt with a 10-day week is because the Bible was not written at the time of the Exodus. So that's the reason why we didn't come out with a 10-day week. Then so who gave us a 7-day week then? If it wasn't from Egypt and the Bible wasn't written then, so where do we get a 7-day week from? It doesn't say that we left Egypt and went to Mesopotamia. So where do we get that from?
So even if you say, so if you take that in consideration, because you said we would be the vassals, wouldn't we have adapted from the Egyptians?
From the Egyptians,
right?
You see, I don't believe an Exodus happened.
See, now he right there is he Captain called him on it, and now he's trying to flip it now and switch it up, right? We should have adopted a 10-day week if we're the vassal, and the vassal usually take on the people that's ruling over them. That's why Captain told him, and he said, well, I don't believe an Exodus happened. So all of a sudden now Exodus didn't happen.
So okay. I don't think it's historical.
But for us, I got you. But like when you say, like there would be a conundrum then, because either we copying from the Egyptians, we copying from the Assyrians, we would have no originality. So at some point there should be something with us with a 10 or a 7. So by your logic, I guess that would certify maybe that we was influenced by the Assyrians more so. That would be your assumption.
I mean, as far as the 7th-day stuff, yeah, because they had the same system like the Babylonians, and they basically come from the Mesopotamian area also. So they had the same 7-day system and the same calendar system.
So that's his explanation. We can't a whole bunch of speculation on stuff. About we took some from Mesopotamia and coming out of Egypt. Somehow we came out of Egypt and went to Mesopotamia and got from them a 7-day Sabbath when Egyptians had a 10. I mean, we have a 7-day week, and Egyptian had a 10-day week, right? So I think this is the one where he started lying about the Israelites in Elephantine. And this is the one he started lying about those in Elephantine, and I'm going to play the video of the professor that's going to debunk what he's saying, and I'm going to pull it on the web as well and read it off. All right, here we go. So give it in a second so we can put some gap in between the two videos.
No, hold on. I know what you're saying. No Bible text. So you using Plato is actually null and void.
Well, I'm not using Plato. You are.
Yeah, but I'm saying you saying that we're using Plato who's 400. It doesn't make a difference. We know Plato is a real person.
He said he know Plato is a real person. Cap about to attack that. Let's go, Cap.
No. We know he's a real person. It can't be proven. It can't be proven through the historical method where we could find out that people who mentioned him during the time period where he lived.
So mentioning him is good enough, right?
Mentioning Plato during the time period when he lived and documenting Plato is very well accounted for. Plato is not an issue. But hold on.
So just mentioning Plato was good enough for him to believe Plato existed. That's what he just got to saying. Just mentioning him, even though in the writings from him, there's no writings of him until 1,000 years later that they have any proof of. The writings of him dates back to 1,000 years after him, right? Even though we have writings to us documented throughout history, throughout the centuries, but he believes someone just because of mention. This is how these guys, they pick and choose who they want to say is his historical. And we can't say that about Abraham, about Moses, but just because he's mentioned. I mean, Abraham is mentioned and Moses is mentioned all over the place in different writings. People from Egypt mention him. But that is not good enough for him to say Moses was historical, right? But Plato is. So let me continue to these guys just
watch this. We have evidence of Judeans writing in Elephantine, right?
Here's about the lie. He have evidence of Judeans writing in Elephantine.
We have them, and this is how I'm going to answer your question. If Moses existed...
Let's go real slow. If Moses existed...
Or Moses is written about before Plato, how is it that the Exodus that's celebrated in the Elephantine region had nothing to do with an Exodus or Moses? How is it that the people who are living in Elephantine are contacting the Samaritans in northern Israel, contacting the Judeans in Jerusalem, and they are telling them we need permission to build a temple?
See, there's the lie. He said that the Israelites in Elephantine are contacting the Israelites that's in Judea. I mean, they just came back they were just released by Cyrus, came back into the land, build Jerusalem, build the temple, and they contacting them about he said rebuilding their temple. I'm gonna read it to you. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna give you two sources, two witnesses that said something different than what he's saying. A professor's gonna say, and I'm actually reading off the internet that was not what they was contacting them for. They already had a temple already. He said they was contacting them, so give them permission to build a temple. It already had a temple built already. We're almost showing Rudy. So he's lying, all right?
In Deuteronomy, you're told you can't build a temple outside of Jerusalem. So how is it that if Moses existed or the writing, these people in Elephantine who are Jews, bloodline Jews, don't know anything about an Exodus or Moses?
You hear what he just got to saying right there? These people who are Jews, he said bloodline Jews. I mean, they have to have existed bloodline. That's a lineage. That's speaking of a lineage. People who he claiming doesn't exist, he claiming now is a bloodline. People in Elephantine with the writing, I'm going to prove that. And that writing dates back, that predates the Dead Sea Scroll. Dead Sea Scrolls is around, 200, 250 BC? This writing he's speaking of here goes back to 400 BC. Predates the Dead Sea Scroll, the writing that he's speaking of. And he's claiming that these people were asking for a permission to build a temple and speaking about doing a Passover that have nothing to do with Moses, or they didn't know anything about Moses, but they're talking about an Exodus that have nothing to do with Moses. We're going to read it and show you that this guy's just lying. That's misinformation. See, when you fact check them, you see the lies that they're telling. Okay, let me just play it back real quick one more time. You hear this garbage right here. This guy's a certified liar.
Contacting the Samaritans in northern Israel, contacting the Judeans. If Moses existed,
or
Moses is written about before Plato, how is it that the Exodus that's celebrated in the Elephantine region had nothing to do with an Exodus or Moses?
The Exodus that was celebrated in Elephantine have nothing to do with an Exodus or Moses. How does that make any sense? That's just dumb. How are you celebrating an Exodus, but an Exodus in Elephantine, but it has nothing to do with an Exodus and Moses when it's the same people? Moses is an Israelite. The people in Elephantine are Israelites. Moses gave us that from the Most High, gave us an Exodus story, the information told us through Moses. The same descendants from that same nation is celebrating an Exodus, but he's saying it has nothing to do with Moses, but it's an Exodus too. They're celebrating an Exodus, as we are told to celebrate the Passover. That was the Exodus us out of Egypt. So when you're talking about Passover, you're going back to the historical event of an Exodus coming out of Egypt with Moses. How can they be two different Exodus from the exact same people? That don't make any sense. It's just dumb.
How is it that the people who are living in Elephantine are contacting the Samaritans in northern Israel, contacting the Judeans in Jerusalem, and they are telling them we need permission to build a temple?
Again, permission to build a temple, suggesting that they never had a temple there at all. They need permission to, and now they're asking this from the Israelites who came back from the Babylonian captivity under Cyrus and the Samaritans. That's who they're asking for permission to build a temple, even though these people went down into Elephantine in the time of in Jeremiah's time, that was left in the land by Nebuchadnezzar, they decided to go down into Egypt and to settle in Elephantine, the island, right? And then about 100 years later or so, they contacting the brother that came out of the Babylonian captivity, and he's claiming it for them to build a temple. So what was they doing that hundred of years there before the brothers came out of the Babylonian captivity? What was they doing in all that time? Just sitting there doing nothing, not worshiping the Most High at all? We're going to read how they had a temple there.
In Deuteronomy, you're told you can't build a temple outside of Jerusalem. So how is it that if Moses existed or the writing, these people in Elephantine who are Jews, bloodline Jews, don't know anything about an Exodus or Moses?
How do they not know anything about an Exodus, but they're celebrating an Exodus? How's that making any sense? How are you celebrating something you have no idea about? You don't know what that is, but yet you're celebrating it. And it's from your people. That's your culture. Your culture celebrated an Exodus, and you celebrating an Exodus too, but yeah, you have no idea of what an Exodus is. This guy's crazy.
Yeah, you could have left it out. So to say that, I am saying right now, declaring our sonetta, there is no Moses writing at the time.
Listen, that's been debunked already by patterns of evidence. The Moses controversy. If you have not seen the pattern of evidence, the Moses controversy, you need to go take a look at it, because it debunked this nonsense here and clearly proving that there was a Paleo-Hebrew writing at that time, and the Israelites had a writing at that time, an alphabet at that time, and it proves Moses could have actually wrote it. The evidence prove that we had a writing system. Israel had a writing system. It's been found down there in the caves of Egypt there, okay? In the Turkish mine caves there. If you need a book, you can get Douglas Petrovich book on Hebrew being the oldest alphabet. Information is all there, all right? And again, pattern of evidence, the Moses controversy debunked this nonsense here.
That is not what I mean.
No, hold on. So how could Plato copy somebody that don't even exist or a writing exists? I just use the Elephantine papyri as a primary source, which is in my book also.
He using the Elephantine papyrus, which is called the Passover papyrus, as a primary source. He says it's a primary and a secondary source. It's a primary source that goes all the way back to the 400 BC. That he's using that in his book, and he doesn't even know what it says. It's in his book, and he's misquoting the primary source, because it does not say that they was contacting the people in Samaria and Judea for permission to build a temple. Doesn't say that. He doesn't even know his own sources that he's supposed to have in this book. This guy couldn't have wrote this book. He couldn't have went through these sources like he trying to say he did, because he don't even know the source, what the source says. It don't say that.
In chapter 2, that shows that those people were not aware of any book or any Torah or any Moses or any Exodus at that time.
Yeah.
This guy that's just dumb. How are they not going to be aware of anything like that at this time? And they celebrating. I mean, anyway, let me finish the video. We're going to read it. All right. It's another pause. I think there's something else he speaks.
Well,
he speaks again about Elephantine. I think one more time, and then we're going to get to the debunking this nonsense.
Agree with the archaeology.
What archaeology?
When I mentioned the photocynatic with the writer.
The photocynatic, it don't say Moses at all.
It does say Moses on it. Again, get Douglas Petrovich book. All right, Hebrew being the oldest alphabet, and he shows you, because he is an epigraph. He's specializing in ancient writings from different culture. And he has deciphered those writings in those caves and dated them back to the time that we was in Egypt, all right? When Moses came in, that it does say Moses on there.
The Mestel, which predates.
That's not the biblical manuscripts. That's what we're talking about. So if he was going to copy Moses, you'd have the Bible and say, yo, he copied this is why I said chronological synchronistic writing, because the Greeks invented that. And the Bible follows that pattern.
But if they have a record of them, they had to exist as a nation.
Nobody's doubting that,
I'm not
Captain.
saying, no.
Oh.
Hear me out. I'm not saying that you're saying that.
Oh, okay.
But if you have a nation and they do have records, they do have a culture, they do have a way of life. Everybody has that. Assyrians, Nubians, Egyptians,
That's fine.
everybody has that. So you can't say, again, as I always say, you can't say that it didn't exist, but they was a nation. No nation exists without some type of law, code, moral ethic, right?
That's fine. But if those people exist and they don't celebrate Exodus according to the Passover according to what the Bible teaches, and they're breaking laws openly, like they don't have a book, I have to make the presumption that there's no book or story around.
He said that the Israelites in Elephantine was celebrating the Passover, not according to what it says in Exodus chapter 12. We're going to prove him wrong again, that they was. He does not understand the source that he has. I'm about to read it.
Laws
Openly, the Jews in Elephantine and the Jews in Jerusalem, because they were assisting them in building a new temple.
There was not a system in building no temple. Stop lying, bro.
Supposed to have a new the Judeans, their fellow Jews, are Israelites in Elephantine who were asking to build a temple outside of Jerusalem.
Are you talking about Nehemiah?
Not Nehemiah. No. This is the people at the Elephantine Island, is at the border of Egypt and Sudan.
That's not even non-biblical though, because you just go in the scriptures where Israelites would go and try to serve God in the land because they didn't keep it in that land. So even that would be biblical. Even Ezekiel 11:16, not to teach, because I don't want to teach, but Ezekiel 11:16, the Lord said He would be a sanctuary in the land where we'll be at. So they actually didn't break the law by doing what they did.
So you have it. So even they was going around building the temple somewhere else, that wasn't breaking the law, because they were just trying to honor the Most High God by having a temple there. All right.
The Jews then who lived in the land, if they were celebrating Passover, it would have to do with what the biblical text says, right, regarding the Exodus and regarding Moses. I am saying that they're celebrating Passover and it has nothing to do with the Exodus, because what they're celebrating is a pre-Moses or a pre-Torah.
No,
He said what they're celebrating in Exodus, that's pre-Moses. That's pre means before. That's before Moses. There is no Exodus before Moses. How is the people in Elephantine in 400 BC when Moses is all the way up in 1400 BC? Moses is 1,000 years before the Elephantine people. 1,000 years before them. How is the people 1,000 years after Moses celebrating an Exodus before Moses? Stupid. This guy's hilarious. This is comedy, bro. This is all comedy, man. This is stupid.
Exactly what you're saying. Right. I'm just answering you saying that they can't do the Passover or something like that.
Build a temple outside of
no problem.
Okay.
All right. This is just stupid, man. Okay. This is just stupid. Let me stop this right here. Let me get down to the debunking this guy right here, man. Let me get to the professor to slam this guy. You don't know what he's talking about, okay? Get a professor to shut him down. Here we go. Let me put the video on. Professor gonna shut him down.
We've been talking about.
She about to shut him down. All right. This is about the Jewish diaspora and the Golden Rule. About to shut him down. All right.
Sort of Assyria, Babylonia, Persia, these areas to the east, but there also was a significant Jewish diaspora in Egypt.
That's in Elephantine that she's talking about in Egypt.
And in fact, the book of Jeremiah mentions the migration of Judeans to Egypt, including Jeremiah himself, in the aftermath of the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC. And here is
that's 586 BC now is when it fell, right?
Passage from the book of Jeremiah. The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the Jews living in the land of Egypt, at Migdal, Daphne, Memphis, and in the land of Patros. So Jeremiah himself here refers to Jewish settlements or colonies located throughout Egypt. And we know from various sources that there was a significant Jewish military colony at a site called Elephantini, or in Hebrew, Yev, which was an island opposite Aswan, so sort of on the border with Nubia. And these Jews at Elephantine were part of a military force, a garrison stationed at Elephantine to guard Egypt's border with Nubia.
See that? It was there was a military garrison to guard their border. It's the same way we was when we was in Goshen. It's the same way we was in Goshen. We was like a military type of people there to guard their border. That's what the Bible tells us when we came out. We came out in military formation. That's what it actually says in the Hebrew. And there was none feeble among us. We moved like an army. All right. We came out in military formation. Not animals all over here and all over the place you see in these movies and stuff, or in the Ten Commandments. That's not how we came out of Egypt. We moved like an army. And we can see right here, even hundreds of years later, they still viewed us as people that's able to protect their borders. We was a garrison, just like we was there in Goshen.
Now, the reason why Elephantine is important in terms of Jewish diasporas is because an archive of documents was discovered there. And this archive consists of over 100 Aramaic papyri, which date between 495 and 399 BC.
You hear the date of that? 399 to 4 something BC. All right.
So basically, these papyri date to the 5th century BC. From the papyri, we learn that the Jews at Elephantine had a temple where they worshipped the God of Israel, who they called Yahu, or YHW, who is obviously the same as Yahweh.
So they had a temple already. They already had a temple. They was not contacting no one to build no temple. Garfield, they already had a temple already.
Right, the God of Israel. And this is very interesting because we see here then an example of a temple dedicated to the God of Israel, not on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, but somewhere else, in this case at Elephantine. And unlike the case of the Samaritan temple on Mount Gerizim, which was also dedicated to the God of Israel, the temple at Elephantine was never condemned as schismatic.
Garfield, never condemned as schismatic, meaning there was no division or schism between the one in Jerusalem and the one in Elephantine.
By Jews. So going back to something that we had covered much earlier on, although we take it for granted in sort of this later looking back on Jewish history, that there could only be one temple dedicated to the God of Israel, and it had to be located on the Temple Mount. In fact, we know that there were other temples, Jewish temples, dedicated to the God of Israel, located in other places, and that those temples were not considered schismatic. And this temple at Elephantine is an example of one of them.
Many temples around, and it wasn't no schism at all. How come Garfield don't have this information? His research is very, very limited.
Now, this temple at Elephantine then existed in the 5th century BC, but in 411 or 410 BC, it was destroyed by the local Egyptian priests.
So we see they had it in the 5th century BC, and then it was destroyed later.
Who served a ram-headed god who was called Chnum or Chnub. This episode, the destruction of the Jewish temple, the temple to the God of Israel at Elephantine, the God of Yahu or Yahweh, at Elephantine, took place when the local Persian official, a satrap named Arsames, happened to be away. He had been called back to Persia. And so the highest ranking official was not around, and the local Egyptian priests took advantage of the opportunity and destroyed the temple dedicated to the God of Israel. And the local Jewish population then of Elephantine tried to muster support for rebuilding the temple, because you had to have the permission of the ruling authorities then to build a temple, and in this case, rebuild the temple. They attempted to muster support for rebuilding the temple, very, very interesting. They wrote a number of letters to various people trying to muster support. And among the people that they wrote was Yohanan, the high priest in Jerusalem. Very interesting. So they actually wrote the high priest in Jerusalem to ask for support for rebuilding their temple at Elephantine, again, showing apparently that the other Jews had no problem with the temple in Elephantine as being schismatic.
So they was writing to get support, not asking for permission. Garfield said they was writing for permission to build a temple. She just got through saying they was writing for support to rebuild the temple. Two different things. Permission and support, two different things. They were not asking for no permission because they already had a temple there already. And she just told you what happened with the temple was destroyed. And they're asking for support, meaning they look like they need money or something, so on and so forth, and different records to go ahead and rebuild the temple. Not for permission to build a temple, but for support.
Interesting. They also wrote to the governor of Yahud, the governor of the Medina of Yahud, and they also wrote to the governor of Samaria, who happened to be the son of Sanballat. So they were also trying to muster support from the people of Samaria. So showing that the relations between the Judeans and the Samaritans, the Jews and the Samaritans, were not always bad. They could be close bad and close good. And in this case, they're trying to muster support. And here is an example of one of these papyri, which contains a copy of a letter.
All right. So again, they're trying to muster support, not permission. Okay. She's gonna read from part one of the papyri. I think this part is about a marriage. If it is, I'm gonna cut it short because I don't need that part. Okay, just debunk that nonsense Garfield was saying, but I'm asking for permission.
To our Lord Bagoas, governor of Judea, right? Governor of the Medina of Yahud, from your servants, Jedaniah and his colleagues, the priests who were in Elephantine, the fortress. In the month of Tammuz, year 14 of Darius the king, when our Samis had left and gone to the king, at that time the priests of Knub, the god, who are in Elephantine, the fortress, gave silver and goods to Vidrang, who was Fraterek here, saying, the temple of Yahud, the god, which is in Elephantine, the fortress, let them remove from there, right? So the Egyptian priests, the local Egyptian priests, bribed the local official who had been left in charge while the satrap was away. They bribed him and they got his permission to destroy the temple to the God of Israel. They came to the Elephantine fortress with their arms, entered the temple, and demolished it to the ground. And the pillars of stone which were there, they smashed. They even demolished the 5 great gateways built of stone sculpture, which were in that temple. So notice this was a big temple with a stone building, with big stone pillars, with 5 stone gateways. All these they burned with fire. As for the basins of gold and silver, these they took and made their own. So this was a big, monumental temple with very rich furniture in it.
So we see that this is speaking of the temple furniture, the basins of gold and silver. They have similar things there as you would find in the tabernacle in the wilderness. So they're mimicking what's there. So Garfield talking about they know nothing about it in Exodus and all that. How come they have all these things in their temple that you can find within the Exodus, within the tabernacle in the wilderness?
Well, they never got permission to offer animal sacrifices in a temple anymore. The local Jewish population does seem to have rebuilt the temple, but animal sacrifices were no longer permitted there.
But they did do animal sacrifices.
And Passover and its origins. Hezekiah and Archie of the lost tribes of Judah.
Okay, stop right there. So we have that clear. Let me come back. Let me stop sharing here right quick for a second. Bring this back up. So we see clearly here that she debunked him clearly. Clearly debunked him, all right? We asked for no permission. And they was killing animals back then before the temple was destroyed. Now let me go to the last part right here. She just clearly debunked him. Let me read what it says. Let me share this last part here. And I'm about to call it night. There we go. All right. Passover in Egypt is 419 BC. All right. All right, this article is inspired by the brilliant online course by Professor Jacob L. Wright. It says many biblical scholars tell us that so far there is little or no archaeological evidence of Israel's exodus from Egypt and the periods which preceded it. Some scholars also doubt Joshua's wars and even the scale of Davidic monarchy. At the other end of the timeline, the Dead Sea Scrolls prove that the entire Tanakh Hebrew Bible, as we know it today, modulo canonization existed in Hebrew manuscripts formed by the beginning of the 1st century CE. The finding at Qumran suggests that there existed libraries with many copies of each biblical book where the people of Judah were able to read them along with contemporary commentary, translations, and exegesis. The question arises, at what point during the first millennium BCE can we find hard evidence that matches the biblical narrative and the formation of the Israelites and Judites as a people and as a religion whose center of gravity is in Jerusalem? There are several carbon dating archaeological artifacts that indirectly corroborate the biblical stories in the 9th century BCE. I discussed some of these in this post. Here we will discuss an interesting piece of evidence from the 5th century BC, which roughly coincides with the return of Zion and the rebuilding of the Second Temple. In 1907, a German professor by the name of Eduardo Sachu discovered the Passover papyrus at Elephantine. So it's called a Passover papyrus because it's dealing with the Passover. The papyrus is written in Aramaic using Hebrew letters and has been scientifically dated back to 1419 BCE. This is the oldest archaeological document found to date outside the Bible. This is the oldest. This predates Dead Sea Scroll. It's older than that, which proves that Jews celebrated Passover during the period which coincides with the return to Zion of Ezra and Nehemiah from the Babylonian exile, and provides independent historical evidence that one, a small Jewish community existed in Egypt, as described in the book of Jeremiah. They worship a god named Yahu, okay, which is similar to Yahweh. They considered Judah, the land of Israel, as their religious authority. Right? They considered Judah the religious authority, so they was not doing anything on their own, right? They wrote to Judah to ask how to celebrate Passover. Maybe they had no Torah scroll, or maybe Torah scrolls did not exist. See, they wrote to Judah to ask how to celebrate the Passover. Something must happen where they must have lost the scrolls or whatever, and they wrote for how to celebrate it. They wasn't asking for permission to build no temple. If he had the source there in his book, this is what the source says. They didn't say anything about permission to build no temple. One of the other Elephantine papyri mentioned Sanballat, who is also mentioned in the Bible. The Passover papyrus is the response to Elephantine community received from Judah outlining the Passover ritual. See, it's a response. They wrote to them, and that writing that they have is a response back to the Elephantine people, telling them how to celebrate the Passover. 7, the timing of Passover in the papyrus can most of the rituals match what we would expect. Elephantine is a small island in the southern part of the Nile River near today's Aswan. Most Hebrew sources refer to it as Yev. For example, this Hebrew article about the papyrus. This is how it looks today. This is how it looks today. This is not how it looked back then. But today, this is how it looked. A Passover papyrus is part of a large collection of documents that were uncovered at Elephantine. The documents were studied by German, British, American, and Israeli scholars and translated from Aramaic to many different languages. Many of the deal with the history of one Pacific family, the family of Hananiah. In this Hananiah, they also say this sounds like Nehemiah's brother. Get that in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 1, and I think 7 and 1 talks about Hananiah. And that Hananiah could also be the Hananiah, the one that was in the book of Daniel. One of them name was Hananiah before his name was changed to one of them Babylonian god's name. One of the name was Hananiah, and some scholars say that that's him, this Hananiah right here. Some of the papyri have been on display at the Brooklyn Museum, where they published by the museum in a book. However, the Passover papyrus is not at the Brooklyn Museum. It is on display at the Berlin Egyptian Museum, which I visited last year with my family. The significance of the Passover papyrus was first identified by British scholar William R. Arnold in a 1911 paper entitled Passover Papyrus from Elephantine. Okay, as Arnold explained, there are many holes in the text which have to be filled in. The English translation of the Passover papyrus, as given by Professor Jill Kratz, is as follows. Now you thus count 14. Now they tell them how to celebrate Passover. Then they respond because they ask how to celebrate, and this is the response. Okay. Now you thus count 14 days of Nisan, and on the 14th at twilight, the Passover, make and from day 15 until day 21 of Nisan, the festival of unleavened bread, observed. So we see is at the 14th at twilight, which is going to say that's sundown. Right? 7 days unleavened bread eat. Now be pure and take heed. Work do not do on day 15 and on day 21 of Nisan. Any fermented drink do not drink, and anything of leaven do not eat. And do not let it be seen in your houses from day 14 of Nisan at sunset. There it is right there. So it begins at sunset. Day 14 of Nisan at when? Sunset. In the Bible, you will real is the 14 at even, it would say in the Bible. But the 14 at even is the 14 at sunset, which ends the 14 and automatically begins the 15th day. So Passover and unleavened bread starts on the exact same day, the 15th of the first biblical month. Here is Nisan, or in the Bible is called Abib or Aviv. And Aviv means the ripening, dealing with the barley. Okay, sunset until the day 21 of Nisan at sunset again. So we see it's sunset to sunset. The 14th at sunset until the 21st day of Nisan at sunset again is when it actually ends again. Okay, and any leaven which you have in your houses, bring into your chambers and seal them up during these days. To my brothers, Jedaniah and his colleagues, the Jewish troop, that's the garrison there, your brother Hananiah, the original Aramaic and Hebrew translations are given in this paper by Dr. Yehoshua Brand. And other important article in the Hebrew is available here as well. So we're going to continue. We suggest some of the missing background information by reading the Temple Reconstruction Papyrus dated at 407 BC. This scroll mentions the sons of Sanballat, the Honorite, right? Horonite. We, our wives and our children and the Judites who are here, all of them, if you do this so that this temple is reconstructed, and you shall have honor before Yahweh, the God of the heavens, more than a man who offers him burnt offerings and sacrifices worth 1,000 talents of silver and gold. Because of this, we have written to inform you. We have also set forth the whole matter in a letter in our name to Deliah and Shemaiah, Shelemiah, that's Shelemiah, the sons of Sanballat, the governor of Samaria. The mention of Sanballat, the governor of Samaria, by name is one of the strongest corroboration of the biblical Ezra and Nehemiah narrative ever found in archaeology. Sanballat appears in the book of Nehemiah, which cast him as one of the chief opponents of the Jewish governor Nehemiah during the latter's efforts to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and carry out his reforms among the Jews. For example, Nehemiah chapter 6 says, "Now it came to pass when it was heard by Sanballat, Tobiah, a Geshem the Arab, and the rest of the enemies, and the rest of our enemies, that I had built the wall, and that no breach was left therein. Also, that until that time I had not erected doors in the gates. Then Sanballat and Geshem sent to me, saying, Come and let us meet together in Keterim in the valley of Uno, and they were plotting to do me harm." And verse 10 of that chapter even mentions the names of his sons. And he came to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, which matches the Elephantine papyrus. So we have corroboration outside the Bible of historical names of these people here that actually existed, confirming what the book of Nehemiah was saying. All right. We constantly are finding evidence that the biblical record is accurate. Historical information that we find it. This is the oldest that we have here. Continuing, you can read many of the linked sources to get the full picture of the significance of the Elephantine papyrus, but I think the most important point to take away is that this is a very strong corroboration of the biblical narrative during the period of Ezra and Nehemiah, which I covered in Jews in the land of Israel. Several important facts clearly emerges from studying the Elephantine papyrus. First, that the Jewish community actually existed in Egypt from around the time of the Babylonian exile of 586 BCE. The biblical text refers to this through the words of the prophet Jeremiah. While the Elephantine Jews community was not necessarily religious, some scholars say that they were polytheistic, which they wasn't. Okay, the papyrus proved that it felt a strong affirmity towards the mothership, which is Judah, and corresponds with Jerusalem seeking help and religious advice. So if they wanted help and religious advice from the Judah who worship one God, they couldn't have been worshiping two gods over there. Okay. Second, that the Elephantine Jews probably did not possess a Torah scroll because it was hard to obtain one, or because it didn't exist. They didn't have a scroll back then. Remember, they had just left and migrated down to Egypt after most of the nation was exiled out, okay, to either Assyria or Babylon, and they had burned the city and most of our records. Third, that the religious leaders in Judah at the time were able to provide precise instructions how to celebrate Passover. Okay, so how is Garfield saying that they didn't know nothing about Moses and Passover? The people in Jerusalem was giving them specific and precise instructions how to celebrate Passover, and they got that from the Torah, the writing of Moses. So how are they not going to know about a Moses? The information came from the ones in Judea who got it from Moses, was passed down, got it from Ezra. Even if the Torah did not exist yet in scroll form, it is clear that from the information on how to celebrate Jewish holidays existed in full detail. If it's in full detail, they have had to have at least Exodus in full, because all the full details are there in Exodus, right? And some of them also in Deuteronomy. So you have to have at least have the first five books to be able to have a detailed account and records of the Passover, and some backstory and so on and so forth to be able to have it. So they have to have it incomplete. And the skills to write it, and they had the skills to write it down in Aramaic, Hebrew, existed in Eretz, which is that Hebrew to be the land, Israel during the 5th century BCE. So there we have it. Completely debunked him. He doesn't read his own sources. He doesn't know what he's talking about. It's just sad. Stop sharing. Doesn't know his own sources of what he's talking about. So I gave you 2 witnesses to debunk that crap. I gave you the professor, and I gave you and I read it off the internet. Okay, so with that, I'm ending right there. I want to say Shabbat Shalom to Emmanuel Mattis, Donald Mattis. Shabbat Shalom, brothers. Thank you, brothers, for coming on with me. I'm still on. If there's any questions, you can leave it in the chat. Other than that, I'm about to sign off. Get some sleep. Got to get up to do the Shabbat tomorrow. So give it a couple of minutes and about to shut it down. So as I've been on here, I'm going an hour and 40 minutes. Okay, not that long. Thought it was longer than that. Give me 1 second here. Okay, go to my closeout stuff. Okay, here we go. All right, so in closing out, I want to say my challenge to the Christian community still stands. Okay, if you guys, my challenge is that, can you prove your Christian doctrine without using Paul's writings? Right, because Peter says that people twist Paul's writing to their own destruction. So I said, listen, let's not, you can say I'm twisting it or you twisting it. Let's just put Paul's writing to the side for right now. And you can use anything else you can improve your Christian doctrine. You have from Genesis all the way to Acts. And then you have anything from James all the way to Revelations. So we're taking out from Romans to Hebrews. So we're taking out. But you have every other thing else you can use in the Bible to prove your Christian doctrine. That's the challenge, because I've never heard a so-called Christian prove their doctrine without going to Paul's writing. I can prove my doctrine, and I don't need to use any writing in the New Testament. I can just use just Old Testament, or I can do vice versa. I can use just the New Testament, and again, I don't still have to use Paul's writings. I can take Paul's writings out and just use from Matthew to Acts and from James to Revelations to still prove the doctrine that I'm teaching. I can still prove it without that. I don't even have to use the Old Testament. Whatever way you want to flip it, I'm versatile. I can do either one. Right? Old Testament, no Old Testament. No Paul's writing even too as well. I can do any of that. So can a Christian do that is my challenge. I'm going to continue to put my challenge out there until I hear a Christian accept the challenge. I mean, I've asked them. They're supposed to be the prominent people out there, and no one is responding because I know they cannot prove that Christian doctrine without Paul's writings. And they're twisting it just as Peter said. All right. So with that, I'm going to say Shabbat Shalom to the brothers. Shabbat Shalom to anyone that's going to listen to this later. Any questions, by all means, leave it in the comment sections. I'm always open to correction. If you hear anything on my channel that you think is wrong or you know it's wrong, you got proof it's wrong, you can definitely reach out to me. The email is scrolling at the bottom here. You can email me about something you saw on my channel that you think is wrong, and we can discuss it. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to correct it. I'm going to pull it down. You know what I'm saying? So I'm always open to correction. I don't think I know it all, but I do put in the work to make sure the information is correct before I go put it forth to people. So I'm always going to be humble to correction. You know what I'm saying? So by all means, if you think I'm wrong, by all means, please reach out and let me know, because I don't want to stay wrong. All right. So with that, I'm going to say Shabbat Shalom to the brothers again. Most I want, hope to see you on the next Shabbat again, on the next one. Hope I said something and brought forth some information to help you edify, to defend your faith, and to defend the truth. All right. And with that, we'll go ahead and close out. All right. Shabbat Shalom.
And if you don't know, now you know.
Thank you for joining us. All praises to the Most High God, Yahweh, meaning He is, I am, or causes to be, and His only begotten Son, Hamashiach Hawashai, or Christ Jesus in English, which means Anointed Savior. Please join us again. Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom, Israel.
Now you know.